Oh my! I just completed several minutes of this video, the beginning, and the computer just crashed, went black for 1 second. And I can't play the video, so I have to say what I said over again. I believe there are forces controlling our computers, but that's just me. So let me repeat. Welcome to another video by Rick Miracle in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. This is series 71, part 8, on the book Jewish Activities in the United States, Volume 2 of the International Jew, The World's Foremost Problem, by Henry Ford Sr., the automaker, being a reprint of the second selection of articles appearing from October 9th, 1920 to March 19, 1921. So the situation was quite unusual. You might even call it ugly. But after World War I, they were immigrating, bringing almost exclusively Jewish people into the United States from the Poland area and probably other areas. And they had set up camps in Europe to kind of coach them and train them and how to get through the port at New York City and through immigration. So it was an extremely sophisticated, intense effort to bring all those Yiddish Jews over to the United States after World War I. And you might ask, well, why did they do that, Rick? And almost to the exclusivity, they wouldn't allow other peoples to immigrate at that time. This was a program to bring those Yiddish Jews into the United States after World War I. And when they got here, they acted like they owned the place. And they were well financed. Let's not forget that in 1913, December 21st, Christmas holiday, under President Woodrow Wilson, the elite Zionist, communist, bankster Jewish people conspired with Woodrow Wilson to create the Federal Reserve, which was not federal. In other words, they controlled the USA money supply prior to World War I. Actually, about 6 months prior to World War I beginning. So apparently they had to take control of the United States to bring about World War I, to finance World War I. So anyways, Henry Ford noticed all the ugliness. They were buying up businesses, again, well financed. I mean, they're co-Zionist, communist people pursuing a global world order, organizations, secret societies, Freemasons, Illuminati, Kabbalists, whatever you want to call them. Synopsis, let's just call them the synagogue of Satan, according to the Bible. So that's no small statement. So these people were brought into the United States. How did that happen? Well, they had a lot of propaganda being published in the newspapers saying that the situation was dire. It was an emergency. There were really big problems, and the Jews were in danger in the Polish area. World War I. Germany lost the war. And after World War I, months after, whatever, they had the espionage event where they sent a bunch of Bolshevik leader Jews into Russia to abduct the Tsar and his family and execute all of them, and then spend the next 10 to 15 years killing up to 100 million Christians and Russians and other good people, non-Jews. That's on the Jeff Rent's website. There's a report with 100 million. A lot of other reports I've looked at said it was 66 million non-Jews and Christians and Russians and everything in retaliation for the treatment they received in Russia for the previous 100, 200 years. And in a Jewish popular newspaper, 25 million Christians and other good people were killed in Russia after World War I. 25 million, 66 million, 100 million after World War I. So apparently, World War I was brought about because they could not convince Turkey, the Turks, and the Sultan, the leader, who controlled the Middle East with something called the Ottoman Empire, to allow the Jews to enter Palestine and create the State of Israel. So they had to bring us World War I. And after World War I, when Britain had agreed to do that with the Balfour Agreement, after the war was over, Britain reneged on the promise, signed a letter. You can look it up online. And so the world had a Great Depression all over the world. The money suppliers, the banksters, the communists, the Zionists, the Bolshevik Jewish people, the people who were slaughtering people in Russia at the time after World War I, they brought on a worldwide depression. A lot of people in America hear about the Great Depression in the United States. What they don't know, it was going on all over the world, because Britain had backed out of its agreement with the Balfour Agreement to give the Zionist, elitist Jewish people the Palestine and to coerce or force the Turks and Turkey to do so. You can understand that. Britain didn't want to turn against the entire Middle East. So they had to have World War II to finalize that task, and it was accomplished. So anyways, back to this book. The Jewish activity in the United States, the international Jew, the world's foremost problem. So after World War I, they had to have a lot of propaganda in the newspapers saying it was a terrible situation in Poland after World War I. They were under threat from the Polish citizens and anybody else. So the articles were in the newspapers. Anyways, according to this chapter I'm reading, why did the Jews dislike the Morgenthau report? Apparently they sent half a dozen elitist, many of them high-level Jewish people, over to Poland to put a bird's eye view onto the situation and report back with reports so that they could use those reports to furtherance get all those Jews to be moved to the United States. And I would suspect they were moved into other countries too. So lots and lots of Yiddish Jewish people who had been a thorn in the side of Russia and occupied, coexisted in Poland for 800 years, and all had turned traitor on Germany during World War I because the Britons, who were losing World War I, had made an agreement with the elite Jewish people. The elite Jewish people approached Britain and said, hey, you're losing the war. Maybe we can help you out. We can get all the Jews in the world to support you. We can get you all the money. We can get the United States into the war because we control the current president. And we control the American money supply, 1913, December 21st. In the middle of 1914 is when World War I was started. So you had something called a Jewish question all over the world, and apparently even debated and argued in the United States. And something called the Zionist pursuit of a homeland in the Middle East. And something called communist. And all kinds of other propaganda and businesses popping up everywhere, like porn businesses and the movie theaters and TV and radio. And apparently these people who were imported into the United States, these Yiddish Jewish people, they were buying up the publishing companies, magazines, movie theaters, liquor industries, getting into baseball, and were well financed. Let's not forget they owned and controlled the USA money supply. The United States was their piggy bank. so to speak. And please, anybody, tell me where I'm saying something wrong here. And if you talk about what's in this book, and you talk about some material that the rabbis are saying right now, in other words, if you talk about the truth, apparently there are states in the United States and emulating, copying all those countries in Europe where it was since World War II illegal to talk about these things. So apparently 20 plus or minus states so far in the United States have passed laws because of the issue about boycotting Israel, people trying to show some resistance to their approval of Israel growing leaps and bounds by apparently eliminating the people in the Middle East. So why did the Jews dislike the Morgenthau report? And I do apologize for these openings on each video, but I have to remember that a lot of people haven't watched all my videos, so they don't have all this information to just learn about what's in this one chapter. But I did make part 7, series 71, Freemasonry and Satanism, book review 71, part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this will be part 8. And there are 4 books like this with the excerpts from Henry Ford's newspaper. So I'll read from this particular page here about the why the Jews disliked the Morgenthau report. It seems a far cry from the Jewish question in the United States to the same question in Poland, but insomuch as the Jews of the United States are constantly referring to Poland for propaganda purposes, insomuch as there are 250,000 Polish Jews arriving in the United States on a schedule made by their brethren here. So the Jews here, after World War I, arranged for 250,000 Polish Jews to come here. And when they did get here, apparently they were mocking and ridiculing we USA citizens, singing nasty songs in the movie theaters and everything else. And it was so ugly that Henry Ford bought a newspaper and published all of that. So the Polish Jews, the Jews here wanted the Polish Jews to be brought here. And then, of course, they were Zionist and communist, and they were well financed because their elite brethren had created the Federal Reserve during Christmas holiday with their puppet president, Woodrow Wilson. And that happened because President Taft, the previous president, and many countries all over Europe would not cooperate with the elite Zionist, bankster, Illuminati, high-level Freemasonic organizations, Jewish peoples to convince, attack, destroy Turkey, the Turks, and the Sultan, to destroy the Ottoman Empire so they could get the Palestinians' land to create the State of Israel. So they were saying then so much the people of Poland have had their own illuminating experience with the world program. It would seem that Poland has something to teach the United States in this respect. Especially is this true since it is impossible to pick up an American newspaper without finding traces of Jewish anti-Polish propaganda, a propaganda which is designed to take our eyes away from the thing that is transpiring at a port of New York. Okay, so I already made part 7 with all that material. So they sent half a dozen elite people to Poland to investigate and report, because there were even debate issues in the United States in Congress, as you would expect, about importing all these Jewish people into our country. So they had to send some people over there to make reports, and then they would bring those report backs. And hopefully, when they had those guys go over there, a lot of them high-level Jewish elitist people, they were hopefully going to get reports that were going to support their position, that the situation was too horrible in Poland. We had to bring them to the United States, etc., etc., probably Britain and France and everywhere else. But apparently some of those reports didn't come back favorable, so they were ignored by the major newspapers in the United States, ignored by the government, ignored by the president, ignored by the Jewish press. So apparently there was a lot of anti-Semitic attitudes way back then, before World War I, during World War I, after World War I, between World War I and World War II, during World War II, and after World War II, right up until today. Apparently, there is a biblical prophecy that they are to rebuild King Solomon's temple. Some kind of world religion to be recreated. All this pursuit brought us the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, apparently the Chinese Revolution. I don't know, if I add it up, would it be 1 billion people have been killed so far? To bring us to the point where we are today, April 2nd, 2019. And all kinds of YouTube videos and press releases and magazine articles and websites and controversy in governments and wars going on. Preparations are being made, it seems, for World War III or some kind of world calamity. Even the government is announcing that that the electric grid might go down. The FEMA people made that announcement a month or so ago. Apparently, just recently, President Donald Trump just signed an executive order investigating what to do if we have an electromagnetic pulse or a blast of energy from the sun that would bring down the grid. So what are they doing when they're coming up with all these different potential scenarios of the terrorists hacking into the power plants, the airports, and bringing down the grid or closing the airports or having planes just drop out of the sky? Do you think all of this is just a coincidence? They're preparing for something. It's obvious, and a lot of people are talking about it, but nobody seems to really be understanding the serious situation we are in all over the world. So I did go on YouTube and on Yahoo and looked a little bit at the situation just from a few countries about the situation of anti-Semitism on the rise all over the world right now. And apparently the passage of some kind of Noahide laws to replace the Ten Commandments, the Christian religion, and all of that, apparently destroying the Islamic religion. So they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple. They want to enforce some kind of Noahide laws. Apparently the Shehedrin, the religious organization in Israel, is trying to coerce or convince our Congress and our president to start enforcing those Noahide laws that were passed in secret, by the way, in 1991 with President George Bush Sr. signing that executive order, that legislation. So they want the Noahide laws enforced. They want to rebuild King Solomon's temple. And apparently, anti-Semitism is on the rise all over the world. So obviously, this is no small thing. And apparently, 20 states in the United States, plus or minus, according to a video I was just watching, has already passed legislation saying that it is illegal to talk about these things, about these people who are trying to take over the world, which ironically coincides with a biblical prophecy. A biblical prophecy that's true prophecy or false prophecy? How about a biblical prophecy that is created prophecy? And where do they get prophecy from? What kind of beings in another dimension? Maybe from hell. behind the veil are talking to these Jewish prophets who are into divination, which is sorcery and witchcraft. These prophets are sorcerers and witchcraft. They're communicating with these other beings. They give us this prophecy about a world government and the destructions of countries and people and the enslavement of them all over the world, putting microchips into their bodies. And the movies they've made, like Hunger Games movies, it just boggles my mind that people can't see what's going on right in front of our faces. So anyways, I made this little video, I think it's 40 minutes long, about my little investigation into anti-Semitism in different countries. And I am quite confident you pretty much can type in all the other countries like Canada and France or any countries I didn't plug into that. We've already seen what the program after 9/11 has accomplished in the Middle East at destroying all those Arab countries. And if you go on the internet and look up Greater Israel, you'll see the maps about the Greater Israel extending from the Iraqi Euphrates down to the Egyptian Niles. Apparently, the old ancient property lines of the ancient kingdom of Judea. So they want to bring back that ancient kingdom. So who's doing it? According to the Bible, it's Jews who call themselves Jews, but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. And we are certainly seeing a lot of satanic rituals all around us, statues and symbols, and right out of an Indiana Jones movie. But take a look at this clip about my little peek into anti-Semitism around the world and King Solomon's temple and the enforcement and secret passage of some kind of Noahide laws, all seemingly coming from an organization, a religious organization in Israel called the Sanhedrin, which, by the way, is the same group of people, not the same individuals, but the same religious organization, the Sanhedrin, that rejected Jesus as the Savior and had him crucified. And ever since Jesus' time, the Jewish people have maintained their government without a country since they were dispersed all over the world. And plus or minus 100 different countries, they were banished and exiled year after year for 2,000 years. Even massacred, burned at the stake. Exiled, banished from Spain, from France, from Britain, all over the world. 100 different countries, 2,000 years, people without a country. But now they have a country. And they control the world with all the banking systems and the secret societies, obviously into Luciferianism, Satanism by their symbols and their books, many that I have already gone over. Take a look at this clip. Hello, this is Rick Miracle, author of the many videos in the series Freemasonry and Satanism, book reviews, and my other series, media and press releases, The New World Order, and my other series, Sky Spraying and other documentation about geoengineering and weather control. And I also did a couple months worth of live streaming until YouTube cut me off. I guess they were too insightful, the things I talk about. So anyways, I've been noticing a lot of things going on in the world, and I thought I would point it out and see if we can make some sense of it. So the topic I'll start out with is I just plugged into Yahoo search Israel to rebuild King Solomon's temple. And I think it ties in with another problem. Anti-Semitism in Mexico. Anti-Semitism in America. Anti-Semitism in Brazil. Anti-Semitism in the Netherlands. anti-Semitism in Holland. And I could plug in more countries. Please do. You can probably plug in anti-Semitism in Africa and India and China and Germany and France and Britain and Canada, etc., etc., etc. But let's try to focus why the world is having issues with a group of people apparently bent on fulfilling biblical prophecy and bringing world Armageddon, world destruction. You think I'm kidding? And a lot of people have been taught that Christianity or religion is unnecessary. A lot of social conditioning. Yes? No? They're taught in schools that Jesus really didn't exist. It was all about mythology or created to control people. You've heard these things. Then why, pray tell, would Israel want to rebuild King Solomon's temple? Wouldn't this be a spiritual thing? While they want to destroy Christianity and the Islamic people's religion and apparently the Hindus people's religion or the Buddhist China's people, Asian people's religion, and Iran Zoroastrianism and so much more, it gets quite complicated. Wouldn't you agree? So I just went on Yahoo image site and I plugged in Israel to rebuild King Solomon's temple, as you can see here. So I'll start from the top and look at a couple of these. Solomon's holy temple rebuilt in Brazil, Israel News. In strong terms, he refers to the Temple of Solomon in Brazil as a theological obscenity and a stain on the honor of the God of Israel. So this King Solomon's temple has something to do with the God of Israel. Meanwhile, we need to remember they want to destroy Christianity. And they're doing a good job. And they're bringing us the New Age teaching, the social conditioning. The young people and other people going through the streets looking like freaks. Homelessness popping up and deterioration of cities and the infrastructure, the bridges and the highways and the water system and the septic system. Somebody is not paying attention to the construction, materials, buildings, infrastructure here in America, and I suspect the world. Somebody is diverting all the money to this pursuit of a global world order with apparently the God of Israel behind it. So it says here, fervent Masonic desire to rebuild Solomon's temple. The second search results line below. Western Freemasonry has long been determined to rebuild Solomon's temple on the Temple Mount. Masonic forces of the United Kingdom, the United States, and Israel are absolutely determined to rebuild Solomon's temple. This plan will bring about World War III, Antichrist, and the beginnings of the tribulation period. Does anybody else have a problem with this? They're bringing it about. It isn't God bringing it about. It's about these people bringing it about. And the next line down, you can see some pictures here. If you go to Yahoo image site, and you can see the designs and the building of the temple. Apparently, a month or so ago, they had a ceremony and a ritual for the altar that's going to be used in the temple. And what do they use the altar for? Don't they use the altar for sacrificing? So the next line says, we're ready to rebuild the temple. Breaking Israel News. We're ready to rebuild the temple by Truly Wise, August 4th, 2014. So this has been going on quite a while. And only recently did they have the ritual ceremony for the altar that will be installed in the temple. And despite the tragic war Israel is currently entangled in, our generation has been blessed with the fulfillment of numerous biblical promises. So it isn't me saying this, it's everywhere. You can go look into it. A new Muslim version, rebuilding Solomon's temple together. Muslims encouraging a joint effort between Christians and Muslims and Jews to rebuild King Solomon's temple. Incredible. Pay attention, folks. Next, there will be a negotiation 7-year peace treaty, again fulfilling biblical prophecy. So I'm surprised that the JewishPress.com would press that piece. I mean, wasn't it Israel and Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, who accomplished 9/11? And they've been destroying all those Middle Eastern countries for going on 20 years since 2001. 2020 is not that far away now. So anyways, there's a lot of videos you can go watch, as you see here on the next search result. Israel to rebuild King Solomon's temple. So how many people do not believe this is all true? Where in Jerusalem will the third temple of God be built? God. You think this is the God of Jesus's father, or Jesus, etc.? The people who crucified Jesus, the people who, and Freemasons, who are opposed to Christianity. So I suspect it's a different God. Unless they killed their own God. Next one down, Bible verses about rebuilding the temple. The next line down, Solomon temple rebuilt under Cyrus. Amazing Bible timeline. So they now have a coin with President Donald Trump's head on it, and King of Cyrus, the last king to help the Jews rebuild King Solomon's temple. After, it says on this search result, King Cyrus gives back the treasures of Solomon's temple that was taken by Nebuchadnezzar. So apparently the Lord talked to Jeremiah in the Old Testament. I made a video on that. And told the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, to go down and destroy Jerusalem and the temple and take the people into captivity, because the Lord was unhappy that they were sacrificing their young men and women to the demon god Moloch, Baal, B-A-A-L. Will Israel build a temple in Jerusalem? Rebuilding the Jewish temple. End time program. So I suppose you get it. You can see it's Solomon's temple on Wikipedia. And you got 881,000 results. So we can see what's going on. And they're quite serious about it all over the world. So I decided to look up anti-Semitism in different countries. So let's just start out in order on my toolbar on the top with Mexico. Anti-Semitism in Mexico. So simple to plug this in your Yahoo search bar. All right, the Tribuna Israeli is part of an organization whose purpose is to work with other agencies to promote understanding of Jewry in Mexico, including publications, and also works to influence public opinion about anti-Semitism in Mexico. I guess global world order means the whole world, the globe. Anti-Semitism in Mexico, Access Mexico Connect. Here's this guy saying, I have never encountered any anti-Semitism in Mexico other than the filth that comes from the mouths of red-necked Americans. None of our Mexican friends have expressed any anti-Semitism, but many of them have never even seen a Jew until we met. All right, so that's what that one person says. And I'm reading these in order of the search results. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League poll, finds a sharp rise in anti-Semitic attitudes in Mexico. The ADL poll finds a sharp rise in anti-Semitic attitudes in Mexico, commissioned by the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, an escalating climate of anti-Semitism. The next line down, anti-Semitism in Mexico, Jewish Telegraphic Agency. Serious problems of anti-Semitism are facing the Jewish community of Guadalajara, Mexico, according to Sergio Nuldisterjar. I love trying to say some of these names. Director of the American Jewish Committee Office for Mexico. Next one down. Anti-Semitism stirs in Latin America. New York Times. Next line down. Anti-Semitism in Mexico. Next line down. Did Netanyahu cause rise in anti-Semitism in Mexico? Mexico, land of Nazi and anti-Semites. So now they're saying Nazis are in Mexico? Mexico, land of Nazis and anti-Semite Mexico would seem like an unlikely place to harbor Nazi sympathizers. After all, the majority of the population is Mazitas, a mixture of indigenous and European heritage, with only a small percentage of the population being pure European descent. The next line down. Anti-Semitic attitudes in Mexico City. Next line down. There is still so much evil. Growing anti-Semitism stuns. And there's 2,530,000 results on the bottom. Wow. Next one. Anti-Semitism in America. Wow. Anti-Semitism in the United States, Wikipedia. Anti-Semitism in the United States has existed for centuries. In the United States, most Jewish community relations distinguish between anti-Semitism measured in terms of attitudes and behaviors. So why would people, presumably all over the world, have anti-Semitic attitudes? Next line down, the Jewish Americans, anti-Semitism in America. Jewish Americans have flourished in America, enjoying immense freedom and opportunities. Anti-Semitism in America, Jews on field and stage, Jewish life in America. And there's plenty of videos you can go watch or images on Yahoo image site. You can see here, Anti-Semitism in America image results. Please go look at this stuff. History of anti-Semitism in the United States, Wikipedia. Next line down. Anti-Semitism is rising. Why aren't American Jews speaking up? Anti-Semitic hate crimes are on the rise, up 57% in 2017 from 2016, the largest single-year jump on record. And apparently, a video I was watching on Adam Green's YouTube channel, that apparently the many states are passing laws to make it illegal to speak negative about, I guess, Israel or boycott Israel. So a lot of activity, and apparently, according to many other videos I've been watching and websites and books, yeah, these Jewish people control the United States, the Federal Reserve, the stock market, the education system, the medical system, even Rothschilds owning all of the power plants and so much more. And apparently they're sucking a lot of money out of the United States, and apparently all the people that control the United States are not paying attention to the buildings and bridges and highways and communities and citizens and children. Apparently we're all under attack. So I suppose our infrastructure will continue to deteriorate while they are focusing their money and resources by the Zionist Jewish secret society, Illuminati controlled presidency, and the representatives and the congressmen and the state leaders and the city leaders and the huge corporations and RAND corporations and all these other aerospace corporations. So maybe these are why there are many anti-Israel attitudes. People who are aware. And apparently in times like this, truth is treason. Truth is a crime. Anti-Semitism rising. Why aren't American Jews speaking up? Anti-Semitism in America. Fred Maroon. If the growing trend of anti-Semitism in the United States is to be reversed, Democrats must fight anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. Republicans must fight anti-Semitism within the Republican Party. Next slide down. Anti-Semitism in the United States. Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League is the premier organization monitoring, tracking, responding to anti-Semitism in the United States. I wonder, is it an anti-Semitism thing to look this stuff up and to see what's going on all over the world and making a video and reporting on it? I suspect they would say so. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in America. Jonathan Greenblatt, chief executive of the Anti-Defamation League, spoke with the Times about the surge in anti-Semitism and the reasons behind it. Could it be that they're killing all of the Palestinian peoples and taking the land? Could it be that the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, were involved in 9/11 and deceived the American people, creating hatred for the Arab peoples so they could destroy all of those countries? Could it be that people in the world are more intelligent than these people think we are, and we're aware what they're doing and we don't approve what we're doing, and they call that anti-Semitism? There is still so much evil growing. Anti-Semitism stuns. Anti-Semitism has become a charged topic on many American college campuses, with Israel as the detonator. The rampage at a Pittsburgh synagogue has revealed the Jewish rifts in Israel. So I'm convinced some of these events that happen are contrived or planned false flag events to sway public opinion, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. So we don't know the truth. Opinion. American anti-Semitism, it's getting worse. American Anti-Semitism, It's Getting Worse, by Jennifer Rubin. Jennifer Rubin, opinion writer, reporting from a center-right perspective, October 27, 2018. Next line down. What is anti-Semitism? Right from the ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Anti-Semitism, it may take the form of religious teachings that proclaim the inferiority, gotta have some of my coffee, inferiority of the Jews, for instance, or political efforts to isolate, oppress, and otherwise injure them. Well, apparently, it's these Zionist, Jewish, Illuminati, banksters, Freemasons, etc. that control the world and are bringing us all to destruction. So it seems. Anti-Semitism in America, Leonard Dinerstein. And history of anti-Semitism on eBay. Seriously, we have everything. And there are 11,400,000 results on the bottom. Moving on, anti-Semitism in Brazil, of all places. Brazil is a huge country, if you look at a map and see. A lot of powerful forces out there in the world that seem to be strategically being mobilized, and agreements made, like the European Union recently having an agreement with China and other countries, even Russia, to protect Iran from the apparent threats from Israel and the United States. So are these people trying to create World War III? So it seems. Anyways, anti-Semitism in Brazil. A series of anti-Semitic actions have taken place recently in Brazil. It was reported by the Washington-based Council on Hemispheric Affairs. Wow, you have a Washington-based Council on Hemispheric Affairs, which noted that there are troubling signs that right-wing factions within the nation's military and their civilian supporters have begun to oppose the government's commitment to gradually liberalization of Brazil's institutions. So liberalizations, progressivism. Are you progressive? Are you liberal? What does it really mean? Anti-Semitism in Brazil, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. The anti-Semitism in Brazil, the Times of Israel. January 30th, 2019. Anti-Semitism in Brazil, January 30th, 2019. Reading the line here. IDF team aiding search at Brazil dam disaster met with praise and criticism. Anti-Semitism, Brazil's elections, and more. Today on the show, hatred, prejudice, guns, who is an American, who is a Brazilian, the congressional elections next week, real Christians versus fake Christians. So I suppose they will have to disarm we people in America to be able to have this global world order they're pursuing, or as George Bush Sr. said, out of chaos and anarchy will come the new world order, a world of laws. So I suppose these laws, the Noahide laws, apparently passed secretly. You can look these things up on Yahoo search or Google search, whatever, and verify what I say. But apparently they have these Jewish laws that they passed secretly in 1991 with President George Bush. In those laws, heresy is a crime punishable by beheading. And if they declare Jesus was not really the Savior, then anybody who continues to believe in Jesus will be accused of heresy. Anybody who doesn't take the deity that they proclaim as the deity will or possibly could be beheaded, according to the Noahide laws. Look into it. Anyways, back to the anti-Semitism in Brazil search results. History of the Jews in Brazil, Wikipedia. Brazil strictly condemns anti-Semitism, and such act is an explicit violation of the law. What did I just say about the Noahide laws? According to the Brazilian Penal Code, it is illegal to write, edit, publish, or sell literature that promotes anti-Semitism or racism. So they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple for their God of Israel. And if you disagree that that God is supreme over the God of Jesus, or the Islamic people's deity, or the Hindu people's deity, or the Buddhist people's deity, and if they control the governments all over the world and all the governments pass legislation, this promises to be some very interesting times in the future. Right out of some of these crazy movies, like the Hunger Games movies, etc. Bad people, anti-Semitism in South America, widespread. Claus Hart. Brazilian rabbis insist that the Iberian culture is still marked by strong anti-Semitism, and that Spain and Portugal, who colonized the Latin American countries, deeply instilled Christian anti-Judaism as well as racist anti-Semitism with all its stereotypes and prejudices in South American society. Here's your videos on this. Germany, Brazil's major shakeups at the polls, anti-Semitic attack rocks. Brazil, new president, USA, anti-Semitic shooting, Reds new. Anti-Semitism in Brazil. The council concluded that these incidents are symptomatic of its new upsurge in anti-Semitism in the nation, which has a Jewish community of 150,000 people. Brazil, that huge country, has 150,000 Jews, not too many, yet they managed to create anti-Semitism in that country. So I suspect those 150,000 Jewish people probably control a lot, and probably there's a lot of people who are not happy about that. Doesn't seem fair to me that a small group of people can control the world. But then again, they are trying to rebuild King Solomon's temple for the God of Israel, fulfilling some biblical prophecy, which prophesizes Armageddon, world destruction. Albert Pike in the 1880s wrote a letter to his Freemason friend in Italy, Mazzini, that there would be 3 world wars to bring about the global world order. So I suppose all is moving forward according to these evil people's plans. And not all Jewish people support this, and all the people who support this are not all Jews. Seems to be something like the synagogue of Satan mentioned in Revelation in the Bible 2.9 and 3.9. Anyways, anti-Semitism in the land of Carnival, Israeli national news. Few people in Brazil really know how Israel came about, even though Brazil was one of the 33 nations that voted in favor a UN resolution 181 in 1947. Brazil is facing rising wave of anti-Semitism, a rising tide, the rising tide of anti-Semitic agitation in many of the Jewish centers in southern Brazil is described in an article published in a local Yiddish Volksschule or whatever it is. Anti-Semitism in Latin America troubling. Anti-Semitism stirs in Latin America. Brazil virtual Jewish tour. And there were how many results? Isn't that odd? It doesn't say how many results on the bottom of this. All right, over here, Netherlands anti-Semitic problem. And these are video results. Anti-Semitism in Europe. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in Britain. Anti-Semitism in the Netherlands and the UK. Israel accuses Dutch TV parody of anti-Semitism. Rising anti-Semitism forces Jews to question future in Europe. Labour, Jewish slur is not anti-Semitic. He's got a problem with Jews. Yair Lapid on Jeremy Corbyn, BBC Newsnight. Lord Jonathan Sacks, anti-Semitism is the new anti-Semitism, BCC. Anti-Zionism, is the new anti-Semitism. People in politics, these are videos on YouTube. Anti-Semitism, a widespread problem. Opening of the anti-Semitic campaign in Germany, 1933-1950. Anti-Semitism rises in France. Victims of UK anti-Semitism discuss anti-Israel Jewish issue. Berlin Jewish youth give their take on anti-Semitism. Labour adopts new anti-Semitism definition. So I didn't pick these results. I just searched on YouTube. Democratic Republican Ihad Omar ignites anti-Semitic controversy. So this Congress, this representative in American government, the White House, at the Congress building, spoke about the truth about what's going on in Israel and the destruction of the Palestinian people and people in America boycotting Israel. And they really went after her. You can go find a lot of videos on her, how you say her first name. Iihanomar, Omar. Germany and the problems of anti-Semitism. And I mentioned earlier that apparently in the video I was watching this morning, the European Union, which includes Germany, are uniting with China and Russia to defend Iran against apparently agitation and aggression by Israel and the United States. President Donald Trump has said a lot of negative things about Iran. So these sounds like the bringing about of a World War III situation. Who knows how they'll do it? Does Labor have an anti-Semitism problem? Debate BBC News. Corbyn struggles to shake off the Labor anti-Semitic tag. So the politicians really can't say anything negative about Israel, Jews, Zionism, the banksters, the secret societies. One reason is they're bought and paid for by those peoples. Plenty of search results. So let's check out my other one here. Holland's problem with anti-Semitism. So I searched that. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in Britain. Ingram, anti-Semitism hiding in plain sight. Anti-Semitism in Europe. Democratic Party in chaos over anti-Semitism resolution. Does the UK's left have an anti-Semitism problem? And again, there's a lot of controversy in the United States news calling on Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and the left to resolve their anti-Semitic attitudes, and they better punish people who say anything. Holocaust survivor Maurice van der Poel recalls anti-Semitism in Holland. We need to talk about anti-Semitism. So if you talk about it, you're accused of being an anti-Semite. The Women's March has an anti-Semitism problem. He has got a problem with Jews, Yair Lapid on Jeremy Corbyn. So apparently these are worldwide issues, and they are very serious, and apparently the Zionist Jewish banksters controlling the United Nations and so much more, many countries and its leaders, apparently even in cahoots with President Donald Trump, and even in states like South Carolina passing laws to make it a crime to boycott Israel or have promote the truth about what's going on in Israel, and people not agreeing with what's going on in Israel, and the intentional destruction of the Christian religion or the Islamic religion and other religions, and the global world order. Then they need to disarm the United States people. A lot of these things are going along at breakneck speed. It's all moving forward like a freight train. Benjamin Netanyahu is fine with anti-Semites as long as they support Israel's occupation. Jewish groups say Labor isn't doing enough to stop anti-Semitism on Good Morning Britain. Dramatic spike in anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. When does criticism of Israel cross into anti-Semitism? Ken Livingstone suspended from Labor over anti-Semitism. So there you have it. I could have searched Africa. I could have searched Canada. I'm certain I would have found plenty of results. I encourage anybody watching my video to go and do some search results and find out about this thing about rebuilding King Solomon's temple. And let me try something here. Oops, can't get my spelling right. Wow. The computer is changing. I can't believe this. The Noahide laws to decapitate Christians and the history of FEMA. Wow, I didn't expect these results. 240,000 results. So they want to destroy Christianity, and they want to make the Noahide laws the laws of the land. And the very first result here says the Noahide laws to decapitate, behead Christians. And the history of FEMA. Apparently, FEMA and the military governments have purchased 30,000 guillotines for this purpose. The 7 Noahide laws, universal morality, Jewish essentials. Now, call me crazy, but let me try to rationalize this. For the past couple thousand years, the Jewish people have been banished and exiled, massacres, burned at the stake, policed, etc., etc., run out of countries, run out of Spain, run out of Britain, run out of Italy, run out of France, etc. And it's their universal morality, the Noahide laws, that will be the laws of the planet. These people who have had a problem with everybody else will be the ones in charge of the planet. Noahide law passed by only 4 congressmen. So they passed the Noahide laws in the United States when everybody else was on holiday. That's how they do it, so they can have only 4 people left and all of them vote for it, so they call it unanimous. When really everybody was on holiday or on the weekend. What is Jewish Noahide law and U.S. Public Law 102? Public Law 102-14 defines the 7 Noahide laws as the foundation of our civilization, even though there is no evidence that the United States was founded on Jewish law. The law also requires we transmit the ethics of Noahide law to the next generation and encourage other nations to adopt the 7 Noahide laws as well. Oh my, and this has everything to do with them rebuilding King Solomon's temple, everything to do with the global world order, everything to do with World War I, World War II, 9/11, and the assassinations of many presidents and many other people, and the takeover of the USA money supply in 1913, creating the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, privately owned, and they've been sucking out trillions of dollars off of the out of the country of the United States of America to bring about the global world order. Anyways, another search result here on noahide.org. The Noahide Dinim sub-laws. The Noahide Dinim sub-laws, the 66 Noahide Dinim sub-laws against causing our children to pass through the fire in the worship of Moloch. Right out of the Bible. Dr. Loren Day tells about passing of the Noahide laws. 7 Noahide laws. Repentancenow.com. Repentance now. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And behold, I am setting up my covenant with you and with your seed after you. The Sanhedrin then calls on President Trump to follow the 7 Noahide laws given by God as a building set of laws for all of humanity. The Sanhedrin describes the laws as the framework that will benefit all mankind. The Sanhedrin describes the laws as the framework that will benefit all mankind. And remember, it was the Sanhedrin that decided to have Jesus Christ crucified. The same people are in powerful positions today, calling on President Donald Trump to follow the 7 Noahide laws, to make them the laws of the land in the United States, which were secretly passed in 1991 by President George Bush, signing them into law, surrounded by a lot of Jewish rabbis. The Sanhedrin. Anyways, Dr. Lorraine Day discusses the passing of the Noahide laws. 240,000 results. So with that said, anti-Semitism, King Solomon's Temple, passing of the Noahide laws. I could do more searches on these different topics and the results will be found. But I believe you get the point. We have a problem. A clear and present danger to humanity has risen its ugly head, all fulfilling some biblical prophecy of a coming Antichrist and Armageddon and the destruction of the world. We the people need to wake up. But then again, waking up and discussing things could have you accused of laws in your state or your country. Apparently all over Europe, these laws already exist. You can't talk about these things. Anyways, Rick Miracle reporting on my little rant about the King Solomon's Temple and anti-Semitism and Noahide laws on April 1st, 2019. So is there any doubt that this is a worldwide situation? A new world order, the keyword world, globalism, 2,000 years being dispersed all over the world, people with no country, and now they have one. And there's a lot of history that has gone on for 2,000 years. A lot of revolutions, a lot of turmoil. It's countries all over the world were having issues and banishing Jews, even the Vatican in the 1500s and earlier and later. No small thing, a huge situation. No wonder this book says, the world's foremost problem. Anyway, so I started out at the beginning of this book, and in part 7, I went through the first few pages of this chapter, why the Jews had a problem with the Morgenthau report. So Mr. Morgenthau, an elite Jewish man, by the way, and many others, wrote reports on their investigation in Poland as to the situation after World War I. But they didn't like his report. And they had to find one report that they did like and use that for their own benefits, propaganda in the newspapers, to bring on the situation that would cause Henry Ford to go buy a newspaper, putting his whole auto manufacturing empire at jeopardy, and his reputation, a lot of problems. The Jews worldwide were boycotting Henry Ford. Isn't that weird now? Here in the United States, they're passing legislation that you can't boycott Israel, but back then the Jews were boycotting Henry Ford for telling the truth. But today you can't tell the truth. This is serious business. So on this particular page, so when I read this, I hope you can pick up where I left off or go watch part 7. So Sir Stuart Samuel, like I said, there were half a dozen different people who went over there to investigate, sent from the United States, sent from Britain, sent from different places. They wanted to make it appear as an unbiased investigation, and again, use that information for propaganda purposes, like they do today with the false flags and fake news and all the events they use to stir up hatred with the American people and the world's people, even using 911 for that purpose, to incite hatred of the Arabs by the American people, thus allowing these elites who control our world to kill all those people. And they accomplished that because they deceived and fooled all of us. I'm not the only one that says that. General Wesley Clark says it, as well as many others. So when people wake up to that fact and they talk about it, then they're accused of being anti-Semitic. And if you have a book like this and you talk about what's in it, they'll accuse you of being anti-Semitic. And of course, you really can't be anti-Semitic because maybe 50% of the Jewish people on the planet are opposed to Zionists also, or are not aware of what's really going on. Maybe they could be Christians or atheists. Many of them, famous ones, Benjamin Friedman, Rabbi Marvin Anthelman, and so many more, have written books and protested against this Zionist globalism New World Order program, which apparently, according to the Bible, is a derivative of the synagogue of Satan, showing us all these satanic symbols everywhere. So page 226, on the general cause of the Jewish trouble before the war. Sir Stuart Samuel. The Jews in Poland and Galatia numbered about 3 million. Public opinion has been aroused against them by the institution of a virulent boycott. This boycott dates from shortly after the by-election for the Duma, which took place in Warsaw in 1912. So they took over the USA money supply December 1913 and started World War II in the middle of 1914. And apparently there was a virulent boycott against the Jews in 1912. So the trouble was stirring before World War I. Business relations between Poland and Russia was very considerable in the past. And remember, in 1905, they had an attempt at a revolutionary action, a hostile takeover of the country and killing the leadership in Russia. A failed attempt in 1905. So things were pretty hot over there. No small thing to try to topple the government in Russia in 1905. And a lot of the Jews had fled, finding a safe place of refuge, actually thriving in Germany. They don't tell you that. So business relations between Poland and Russia was very considerable in the past and were generally in the hands of the Jews, not only in the handling of the goods exported, but also in their manufacture. So the Jews had been in Poland after being run out of a lot of countries in Europe. They'd been in Poland for about 800 years. And basically they were generally in the hands of the Jews handling the business transactions in Poland. So after they are in an area for a certain period of time, they usually wind up controlling and owning everything, which I guess would stir up resentment among the peoples. And that situation is existing today. In the United States, the middle class is disappearing. Most people are getting poorer and poorer, and the few elite are getting richer and richer, the billionaires. And they're planning the depopulation, apparently, of planet Earth. Even in USA, Georgia, they have the Georgia Guidestones exclaiming that they want a worldwide population of 500 million people. So I guess that's enough people for them to have on the planet that they can control and be their slaves while they are the aristocrats controlling the planet. And I've gone over their books discussing this exact topic. The Protocols of Zion, series number 8, and the Jewish Utopia, series 67, 3 2-hour videos. A retired intelligence officer, Robert Williams, discovered a book in the Texas library called The Jewish Utopia. They write books about this. A retired United States intelligence officer. Retired intelligence officer finds a book in the Texas library, The Jewish Utopia. You don't have to even really explain this. The title tells us what it says. Go watch my 3 2-hour videos, Freemasonry and Satanism, Book Review 67, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Like I said, closing in on, I don't know how many I'm away from 700 videos on YouTube, or 1,000 hours, and closing in on 15 years of research, 6 years of making videos. So I see a lot of common denominators in this material I'm going over. So I believe what's written in the pages of these books. Some of it, a lot of books I go over are trying to tell us the truth, and a lot of books I go over are part of the deception, and I talk about that. I read those books too. The ones on the Freemasons and the Kabbalah and the Rosicrucians and mysticism and Zohar and New World Order, globalism. We the people need to wake up and act like intelligent human beings, unless we really are goy and goyim cattle like they say we are, unless we really are inferior and have a lower IQ like they say we do. I don't believe it. They've been busy for a long time, obviously. So back then, it says in this book, the business relations between Poland and Russia were very considerably in the past and were generally in the hands of the Jews, not only in the handling of the goods exported, but also in their manufacture. So do you suppose the Polish people in Poland would at some point have a problem with that? Being second-class citizens and virtual slaves in their own country? Initiative in business matters is entirely, almost entirely, the prerogative of the Jewish population. Focus. In the middle of this video. I don't know why the camera doesn't do it the way I like sometimes. So this book was from some excerpts from Henry Ford's newspaper, 1920 to 1921. So do you believe what's in Henry Ford's newspaper? So initiative in business matters is entirely the prerogative of the Jewish population. This looks like Sir Stuart Samuel's report for pursuing some reports by some Jewish elites on what's going on in Poland and why they should bring all those Yiddish Polish people to the United States, which apparently caused a lot of uproar and problems, and Henry Ford bought a newspaper. And even the United States Congress back then was having congressional hearings on the Jewish problem, and a lot of other issues with communism after the Bolshevik invasion, Jewish Bolshevik invasion into Russia, where apparently they had killed up to 100 million people between World War I and World War II, largely by starvation, etc. They had to get rid of all the intellects in Russia, the non-Jewish people. And they were destroying the Christian churches, etc. So you can see what's going to happen when they bring about the world revolution, World War III, whatever they do to bring about the situation, worldwide martial law, taking down the grid like they, I guess, recently took down the grid in Venezuela. And apparently FEMA in the United States is saying that we citizens need to prepare for the grid going down for at least 6 months. Please don't believe me. Go look it up. And President Donald Trump signing some kind of executive order recently. This is April 2nd, 2019, calling on an investigation on what to do if an EMP or a terrorist attack or a blast from the sun or whatever causes the grids to go down or the internet to go down or the computer systems to go down. So why would they do all of that? Why would they be what would they be preparing for? Would they be preparing for what is already been started, a continuation of fulfilling the biblical prophecies, bringing about a new world order that George Bush Sr. talked about, that so many other people mentioned, even the Pope. New world religion, new world currency, one world currency. And apparently, even in China, elsewhere, they're installing electronic systems, high-level microwaves and facial monitoring systems and computer programs, artificial intelligence, to grade everyone socially on your behavior and your actions, like a credit report grade. And if you get a bad grade, you can't get on a bus or a plane or change jobs or even rent an apartment or anything. Probably even get married or have children. You have to have a good citizenship rating, which means you have to be a good slave, in my opinion. Okay, so almost entirely the Jews were in charge of all business matters in Poland. Nearly the whole of the estate agents who act for the Polish nobility are of Jewish race. So apparently even the Polish nobility, back then of course they had kings and queens and dukes and princesses and princes and all these nobilities, and apparently all of their henchmen, I should call them that, but the people who were in charge of business matters, taxation, etc., 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 were Jewish people. I suppose that would make the Polish people a little irate, you think? Apparently they're doing that here in the United States and Europe and all over the world. Brazil and Central America, South America, Africa, countries all over the world. Look what they're doing in China. They already have this system in place. Above are the aristocracy and below are the peasants. The relations with the peasants are not unsatisfactory. So Sir Stuart Samuel says the relations with the Jews who control everything for the aristocrats and the nobility, the relationship between them and the peasants is not unsatisfactory. The young peasants cannot read the newspapers and are therefore but slightly contaminated by anti-Semitism until they enter the army. So the peasants are poor, they can't read the newspapers, so they're not even aware what's going on, why they're in the situation they're in, that somebody else gets to be wealthy and live a good life while they stay poor and never have an opportunity to do anything. And again, if this is the situation after World War I, and this has been going on for 2,000 years, and we can see what's going on in the United States with the advancement of liberalism, progressivism, which is just another word for communism, which is just another word for Zionism, Kabbalism, and sorcery, i.e. witchcraft, or as it says in Revelation in the Bible, those who call themselves Jews but are not, or but are of the synagogue of Satan. This is a spiritual battle, so it seems, as much as a lot of people don't want to buy into that devil situation. But they'll buy into reptilians and gray aliens and the Galactic Federation and friendly aliens and evil aliens. And I think it's all one and the same. They've had these contacts with these beings from another dimension, wherever they come from, throughout history. The world didn't start after the Great Flood. Remember, before the Great Flood, God, whoever God is, had Noah build the ark, and apparently, according to the history of the Hopi Indians in America and the Ecuadorians and the Peruvians and the Romanians and other native indigenous peoples all over the world, some beings or some buddies were helping them build underground facilities or in the mountains to escape the Great Flood. So who would have foreknowledge of the Great Flood, and why would they want to save some of the human race all over the planet? So the world did exist before the Great Flood. And apparently the world was seriously contaminated by genetic manipulation of humans and animals and other creatures and monsters. It was so bad that God, whoever God is, had to have the Great Flood to rid the planet of all of that those monsters. The only way to explain it. the monsters who were controlling the people, and the monsters they were creating. Sex monsters, warrior monsters, slave monsters. Apparently when the Atlanteans went to Egypt, it was a huge problem. They had a battle. You can look into this stuff. And you can look at mythology and see all the creatures. It's not hard to see this stuff. I was informed that it is not all unusual for Polish peasants to avail themselves of the abatement of the Jewish rabbi courts. So Sir Stuart Samuel says the peasants weren't too unhappy, and if they got in any legal issues, they would go to the Jewish courts. And now they want the U.S. government to start enforcing the Noahide laws. And one of those laws, if you believe in a false deity, it's called heresy. You can be punished by beheading. And if you need some supporting data on that, go look up the government purchasing 30,000 guillotines and all kinds of other reports on beheading people. So apparently they are seriously anti-Christian, and they have declared that Jesus was not really the Savior or didn't really exist. And all those people who still believe in him will be heretics, accused of heresy, punishable by beheading, etc., etc. It's all going on around us. So anyways, back to this one page, into this video. That shows the Jews to have occupied a very favorable position in Poland after World War I, and for the 800 years they were controlling everything. It is to be remembered in connection with the previous quotation from Sir Stuart, in which he says, so Sir Stuart, who made one of the reports, he says that if the incitements of the press were repressed by a strong official hand, the Jews would be able to live, as they have done for the past 800 years, on good terms with their fellow citizens in Poland. So these Polish citizens were reduced to peasants. They didn't know any better. They couldn't read. They were ignorant. They worked the manufacturing factories. They worked the farming. But if, as Sir Stuart says here, if the newspapers weren't publishing the truths, I use the word truths, he uses the word incitements. But if the press was repressed, like they're doing today, like states making legislation, making it illegal to talk about the Jews or Zionism or anything else they would consider anti-Semitic, boycotting Israel, etc. So Sir Stuart says if the press was repressed by a strong official hand, in other words, if they couldn't publish the truth in the newspapers, the Jews would be able to live as they have done for the past 800 years, on good terms with their fellow citizens in Poland. And that's why, when they do have this world revolution, World War III, martial law, whatever they do, collapse the grid, collapse the economy, they have to have what they call a purge. Whenever they have a revolution, the communist revolution, all the intellectuals who know the truth have to be eliminated, murdered. There's no other way to put it. Let us take the points made by Sir Stuart and observe what other witnesses say about them. So apparently in Poland at this time, they had an election where somebody got elected who didn't like the situation of the past 800 years, and the newspapers were publishing the truth prior to World War I. Isn't that interesting? Prior to World War I. And everybody just thinks about Germany and World War II. All right, beginning with the point as to the Jews' monopoly of business in Poland. So what I'm trying to do here is to show what's in some of these books that was published in Henry Ford's newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and the attitudes of the people back then, and also be aware that they were bringing 250,000, probably a lot more, Yiddish Jewish people into the United States who were causing a lot of controversy, or as this book says, the world's foremost problem. And apparently they were causing a lot of controversy for the past couple thousand years. And it appears that they are now in control of the planet and are ready to fulfill biblical prophecy. And I did have this one rabbi, I was watching a video a few minutes ago talking about this. So let me play his video right now. So this stuff is disturbing, but what's incredible to me is people don't want to see it, and they're just letting it continue. And I guess if you become too loud of a voice, they will accuse you of criminal anti-Semitism. And if they can't do that, they can make people disappear, assassinate them, like they did with President John Kennedy. He said, "Secret societies are repugnant to the American way of life, and I intend to expose them." And look what happened to him. But see this clip by this rabbi. This involves President Donald Trump. They have him on a coin, and so much more. He recently announced that Jerusalem, the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The United States moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And a lot of other leaders of other countries all over the world are doing the same thing. They control the planet. But listen to this rabbi. Don't listen to me.
Each year we have to mint a new coin for the temple, and each person have to contribute the sum, like a tax, of the half shekel. Here is Cyrus, here is Trump, here is the symbol of the United States, here is the symbol of Israel.
So you think Trump is like a Cyrus who's going to save
It could be, but he can fail.
Right.
Trump, we say Cyrus was on his throne only 3 years.
Yeah.
He listened to all the traitors, so Trump can thrown out from his chair if he will put a program against the Bible. Trump say, "I have a program," and so on. Yeah. The program is against the Bible. And if Trump will put it on the table, he will very soon must leave his chair.
Right, you mean dividing Jerusalem?
Yes, yes.
This is anti-Israel.
This is anti-Jewish, this is anti-Bible.
Because I was worried when all of this started that this could be like a counterfeit.
It can be parallel to Cyrus, and much better than Cyrus.
Right.
Last year we built an altar. Here is the altar for the temple. You see here the coin מחצית shekel, and this is a stone altar. This is the temple, and it's written here in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. The temple coin, the temple coin.
So you said, just to repeat, you said that you are going to try and do another altar sacrifice with a better altar.
With the money that maybe we'll get from this, we will do the 8 times the exercise of sacrificing the Passover lamb, which we are doing it each year on the 10th of Nisan, the day that the Jews in Egypt, Bnei Israel, took the lambs to slaughter them 4 days later.
Okay.
Now we believe the government or the Jews will succeed to hold the Temple Mount, to raise the altar in its very precise place.
So you think the rabbi is kidding? You think President Donald Trump is kidding? You think the Jewish elite are kidding? The leaders of our states passing laws, making it illegal to talk about these things, calling it anti-Semitism? the enforcement of Noahide laws, the purchase of guillotines, rebuilding King Solomon's temple. So anyways, I talked about Sir Stuart Samuel and his report, what's going on in Poland after World War I. Sir H. Rambold, let's see what he says. Rumbold, R-U-M-B-O-L-D, page 226. He says, Sir Stuart Samuel would appear to be mistaken in his appreciation of the part played by the Jews in the pre-war business relations between Poland and Russia and in the industry of the former country. So I did speak wrong earlier, a second ago. The information here was the activity going on in Poland prior to World War I, and of course during World War I, and then after World War I is when the reports were made. So the Jews had been in Poland for 800 years and pretty much controlled everything, as is shown in these reports. Whereas, according to Sir H. Rumbold, whereas it is true that the goods exported from Poland were to a large extent handled by the Jews, only a small percentage of those goods were actually manufactured by them. So the next report comes from a Captain P. Wright. So apparently whoever wrote this press release in the Dearborn Independent back there in 1920 is just quoting some of the things that these elites said in their investigative reports on the activities of the Jews in Poland prior to World War I. And apparently with the election of someone who was trying to do right by the country, and how it apparently was detrimental to the Jewish people who were in control of everything. So I guess if they could keep the people ignorant, that would be a good thing. Apparently what they're trying to do in the world today. Deception. But anyways, Captain P. Wright has his 2 cents on the topic in his report. He says, in Poland, until the last generation, all businessmen were Jews. The Poles were peasants or landowners and left commerce to the Jews. Even now, certainly, much more than half, or perhaps as much as 3/4, of the businessmen are Jews. For both town and country, I think it is a true generalization to say that the East Jews are hardly ever producers, but nearly always middlemen. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. They really like to be aristocrats. They like to be in higher levels of society. And they do not like to be down with the people. It's a DNA thing, I guess, or maybe a religious thing. But I guess they really do have an attitude that they are better than the rest of people. And of course, not all Jews. But according to this, it says almost exclusively they were the middlemen. Economically, the Jews appear at the very outset as dealers, not as producers, not even as artists, and chiefly dealers in money. In course of time, the whole business and commerce of Poland became theirs, and they did nothing else. So when one reads from these pages and other books I've gone over, and one realizes that the Jews were banished and exiled from different countries for 2,000 years, even described in the Encyclopedia Judaica, published in English in Israel in 1973. I've gone over those books. We'll look at those books again and again and again, as long as I can continue making videos and I don't get shut down or what else might happen. With regard to the estate agents mentioned by Sir Stuart Samuel, you know, when I started my investigation in 2005 and 6 and 7, I was a business consultant. So I kind of knew a few things. I helped people with different kinds of issues, real estate, businesses. And I was an engineering technician. I have an electronic technology degree for 10 years prior to being laid off days before Christmas like those big corporations do. But I was a business consultant. And I started my investigation and putting comments on press releases. But apparently there are people who figure out who you are. And people would put in the comments of my comment, and they would say, you know, Rick, you've never really had a real job. Who are you to talk? So how did they know? Were they opposed to me maybe being a middleman or a consultant? Because I happen to have the aptitude and the ethical morality to do so. I mean, if you're a trustworthy, honest person, people would trust you with their money and property and stuff. And even when I was in engineering working at a major aerospace company, they always put me to the top of the group. They even had in one of my reviews, you don't have to tell him anything. Just tell him what you want done and he goes off and does it. I did graduate from a good school in Tampa, Florida. And so I knew how to use a lot of sophisticated equipment, spectrum analyzers and emulators where you could unplug a computer chip from a computer, and plug in a big machine into the chip slot, an emulator, and switch all the dials and exercise and control the computer so you could find out if there were any faults with the manufacturer of it. So every time they put me in a particular department, I went right up to the top, right up to the top. I started out at a company called Centronics in Hudson, New Hampshire. And then I went to, they promoted me right from C Tech, B Tech to A Tech right away. So I went across the street to Digital Corporation, and they promoted me, boom, boom, boom. Then I went back to Florida and got a job at an aerospace company near the Space Center, FYI. So I saw a lot of things, especially the 10 years at the aerospace company, a lot of things that weren't right. You know, they would put you on different charge numbers for different programs when you were working at a different program. And they would say, charge to 2226 program today. But I would say, but I'm not working on that program, or I'm working on the F-18 or the B-1B bomber program. And they would look at me strange, like, do you want to keep your job? And then I would work on the space shuttle electronic power supply program, and there wouldn't be enough work, so they wanted to keep you paid. So they would say, charge your day to this program, but I would say, but I'm not working on that program. And you have to sign your time card, which has in the background, almost invisible, but you can see it, watercolor. If you don't work on a program you're charging to, it's illegal. So you have to put in the number they tell you and sign it, or if you want to keep your job, wink, wink. So 10 years of that, and a lot of times we would be on these programs charging money to the government while we were in the laboratory playing cards, and I would get irritated and go see the boss, the vice president or somebody, and say, can you put me on a program where I can go to work? So I guess I've always had a problem with doing things the wrong way. Even when I was at Centronics, which was a union company, apparently the union had the technicians agree to only repair one card an evening. I worked a night shift. And so I would sit down with a card and plug in the emulator and fix the card for any kind of shorts. This was production, manufacturing. And so I would go turn in the card that it was all checked out okay, and I would request another card. And I would get 10 or so of these union technicians looking at me, even meeting me outside later on, trying to tell me that only do one a day. You can't do 4 or 5 because you're good at what you do. It makes us look bad. So I wasn't happy with the union way of doing business. Anyways, that's the world we live in. So anyway, the point is I've always been that kind of person that was aware of things and spoke up and tried to do the right thing, which is how I got into making these videos and my research. After 9/11, I could see things were not quite right. I mean, how could people be losing their homes in Argentina and California and Florida and New York and Germany? It didn't make logical sense to me that this would be happening all over the world. My friends would tell me, oh, don't worry about it, it's just poor management. And I just couldn't believe that they had poor management everywhere. I had a feeling there was a hidden hand behind all of this. And after doing my research, now going on 15 years, I'm convinced I was right. So back then, you can see what they're saying about the Polish people. Prior to World War I, there was a lot of problems going on with the Jewish people in Poland, which was a nice-sized country. And already there had been 200 years of difficulties in Russia with the Jewish people. So for hundreds of years, 2,000 years to be exact, there have been problems with countries like the Jews being exiled, banished from Spain in the 1500s, and exiled, banished from Britain and Italy, etc., and controlling what they were doing because they always seem to have taken control of things. Is that an anti-Semitic thing to say if it's true? And if it is true, where are we today? And it looks like with the banking systems and the huge corporations and them bribing or blackmailing or even assassinating our politicians like President John Kennedy, we're in a bit of trouble. So Captain Wright, here's another thing he said. Poland is an agricultural country, but the East Jews, unlike the West Jews, play a large part in the country life. Every estate, so every huge piece of property, every estate and every village has its Jew who holds a sort of hereditary position in them. He markets the produce of the peasants, makes their purchases for them in town. Every Polish landowner or noble has his own Jew who did all his business for him, managed the commercial part of his estate, and found him money. Today, looks like that's the case also. Unless you get people like me in those kinds of job positions who has the initiative and intellect and ability to want to do more, to do the right thing. But a lot of people now are just as happy doing nothing, just making a lot of money and drinking beer from the breweries or wine or doing drugs or on drugs or whatever other kind of addictions they may have. And then, of course, you have a lot of people that are just programmed, mind control, and like a bunch of Democrats who think all Republicans are just evil and wrong. And then, of course, you have a lot of Republicans who think all the Democrats are evil and wrong. So I do know a little bit about how the mind works. I've been studying this stuff for years. And it is almost impossible to change someone's mind. It takes a long time to change someone's mind. So I knew when I entered this investigation, it would take a long time for me to figure out what's up. Because I had my own mind control program from the way I grew up, my ideology, my family, going to church, and to be able to convince me that the Satan is really the good guy would be a hard thing to do. And when they have revolutions or changing society, they have to eliminate from the population people who have the mindset, who believe in things they don't want them to believe. And when they have this world revolution, they'll have to kill a lot of Christians, which is written in the Bible. This is a very evil thing going on in the world. Look what they've done so that rabbi and those people can put a coin with Donald Trump's head on it and put that altar to sacrifice lambs, and of course the Jewish people throughout history have been accused of sacrificing people. Even in Jeremiah in the Old Testament, the Lord sent Nebuchadnezzar down from Babylon, wherever, to Jerusalem to destroy the temple and take the people into captivity. I made a video on that, Old Testament Jeremiah, because they were sacrificing their sons and daughters into the fires of Moloch and Baal. And then they put the archway of Baal in New York and London recently. And later on, I found out they were putting 1,000 archways of Baal all over the world. And coming from the United Nations, the UNESCO, the United Nations Education and Science Department. So obviously they control that. And now it looks like they're focusing on invading Venezuela, and they're talking about destroying Iran before Iran destroys Israel. And it's really interesting to look at the first two countries that the Pentagon and NATO went after after 9/11 was Afghanistan and Iraq, which are on both sides of Iran. You think that was a strategic move? It's all been strategic moves. These people are intellectuals. They are very smart, but they don't have a belief in God and the ethics and moralities of Christians. And they can do anything. And they think the rest of us, goy and goyim, are animals. And even the rabbis will say it. I've published videos where some of their leaders have said that even Benjamin Netanyahu said that we will regret not wanting to be their slaves. They're going to reduce us to a third world country. Look up what Benjamin Netanyahu said in Fink's Bar. I could go on and on and on. I don't get much done from some of these book reviews, actually reading from the book. But you can go find this book. The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem, Jewish Activities in the United States. Sometimes I find them cheap on abebooks.com. I've got nothing to do with A-Books, but there are other used book sites. Back to this book. Besides this, nearly all the population of nearly all the small country towns in Jewish. I'll read that again. Besides this, nearly all the population of nearly all the small country towns is Jewish. Corn and leather dealers, storekeepers, peddlers, and such alike. Regarding Sir Stuart's assertion that Jews form the middle class is almost to its entirety, with the nobles above them and the peasants beneath them, a typical Jewish position. I better read that again. Regarding Sir Stuart's assertion that Jews form the middle class almost to its entirety. So almost entirely, the Jews were the middle class, with the nobles above them and the peasants beneath them. So the peasants were the poor people in Poland. And it says here a typical Jewish position, dividing Gentile society and standing between the parts. Now you know why they're destroying the middle class in America. If you have any money, you have time to think. And when I would have the thought processes about some of these things I was seeing, and I would mention it to some of the people I respected, some seriously wealthy people, they would say to me, Rick, you've got too much time on your hands. Why do you care about these issues? You're doing really good, aren't you? And that was not the answer I wanted to hear. I didn't like that answer. I was doing good. I had a couple of houses, a $30,000 sailboat parked at the marina. It cost $1,000 a month to park it. Property in Maine, 55 acres, a business, employees, nice car, convertible. I gave it all up to do this research because I could see all that mattered little. What are you going to do with all that wealth when they control the system and they can crash it anytime they want? All of that matters nothing. And if I saw something was wrong, I was going to investigate it. My way of thinking all my life. And a lot of other people think that way. I've not been paid for this 15 years worth of work making these videos. I've spent my entire amount of money that I've managed to collect for 35, 40 years in this endeavor to bring all these videos to production and read all those books and have all these books behind me and on other shelves in my office and in the closets and at the storage unit. Okay, Captain Wright, let's see what he says. Again, it is instructive to try and imagine what England would be like under the same conditions. Can you imagine if England, if all the Jews were the middle class and all the English citizens were the poor, and of course the king and queen and the royalty would be the nobles. So if they gained that kind of control in England, can you imagine what it would be like? And apparently that's the way it's turning out here in America. And a lot of these people who become senators and representatives and presidents, you know, it's repeatedly these family lines. And a lot of them, it seems, are crypto-Jewish people. They call themselves Christians, or they have kind of Christian names for generations. But apparently they're really not, and they belong to these secret societies. So I guess they can still continue to believe in and practice this mystery religion, this Kabbalah, synagogue of Satan type religion, if you want the simplest answer. Arriving in London, a stranger would find every second or third person a Jew, almost all the poorer quarters and slums Jewish, and thousands of synagogues. So the Jewish people would be in the wealthy positions, but they would live in the slums because they don't like to spend money on that, apparently. That's how they gain their wealth. They're all about collecting the money and then loaning out the money at interest. Apparently, the Islamic peoples, the Arabs, don't believe in interest. Even Gaddafi, who they had taken out in Libya, had a lot of wealth, I guess because of the oil. But he was loaning money to African nations to build sewer plants and water plants and other things, interest-free. So of course they had to take him out. How many people know that? If you do the right thing, you become the enemy of these people, and these people control the world. Ask President Kennedy about that when you get up in heaven and get to talk to him. They took him out in a horrific way, as well as many other people and presidents of many countries. Don't get in their way. Anyways, arriving at Newbury, he would find practically the whole town Jewish. So he's theorizing if this was the way it was in Britain. Nearly every printed inscription in Hebrew characters. So this is the way they were doing it in Poland. Penetrating into Berkshire, he would find the only storekeeper in most small villages a Jew, and small market towns mostly composed of Jewish hovels. Going on to Birmingham, he would find all the factories owned by Jews, and 2 shops out of 3 with Jewish names. Apparently that's the way it is today. Even Tex Mars sent me a newsletter once. And in it, I didn't believe it. If you buy something from Tex Mars' website, publisher of many books on these topics, he'll send you a newsletter every month. And one of them he sent me said that the CEOs of all these international corporations are Jewish. And I thought, how crazy is that? Because I didn't know what I know now. So I took it upon myself to write down the names of all the international corporations. We all know the names of these major corporations. And I went on Wikipedia, whatever, and looked up the CEOs, and guess what? Generally speaking, pretty much they were all Jewish. So I suppose you probably couldn't get a Christian man to be a CEO of, let's say, Monsanto, putting herbicides and pesticides into people's foods and food products. Only people who are after one thing, power and wealth and money and apparently sexual perversions, and not all Jewish people, and it's not all Jewish people who work for these Jewish people. A lot of other people are greedy and selfish and perverted and power hungry and join organizations like the Synagogue of Satan and all these other secret societies where they have to swear an oath under threat of death to not divulge the secrets or the goings on. And just like the mafia, if you do try to get out of those groups, they'll take you out. So Captain Wright is trying to give the people at home a picture of the conditions in order that they may understand how Poland feels. So can you imagine if you went to Britain and the Jewish people were all the middle class and all the Brits were the poor class and the nobility, the king and queen like they are? The Jewish press strongly resented this. So I guess the Jewish press would not like these bits of knowledge to be out there. Sir Stuart Samuel report is notable for the number of things he mentioned and the few he explained. All right, when I added that last clip to my Movie Maker program, I noticed I'm at 2 hours. So I think I'll end speaking here, but take the video into a few more minutes with a couple related clips on where we are today with these peoples and apparently all their advanced technologies to control people and deceive people, mind control people, kill people, and their plans for this worldwide religion. So I hope you enjoy these few clips. I watch videos, as you can see here, every day, all day, every week, every month, every year. And I'm getting better at copying some of the pieces out of the videos and inserting them into my videos, hopefully making a point. And these people's videos that I do show, please take note of the name of the video and their YouTube name and go watch them and use a discerning mind. Never believe anything or everything somebody says. Put it all in your mind. Use your common sense. Use your brains, use your thinking process, discernment, and come up with your own conclusions. But I think if you pay attention to the things you can see going on and around the world, it looks like preparations are being made for some huge calamity, catastrophe, intentional, I believe, whatever they're going to do. Maybe they just have a lot of choices and they're going to use the best tools at their disposal whenever they decide to do what they have to do because of the ever-increasing awakening of the people on the planet, which will cause them to be reactionary and to do more false flags, more shootings, bombings, or other issues, crashing the stock market or pretending there's a war between Russia and the U.S. or China or Iran or Venezuela. And most people will be oblivious and ignorant to what is really going on and why it's really going on. But let me cease talking and you watch the clips, and thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.
They're constantly bragging about their media connections.
They also coordinate a lot between organizations. So like we focus on political. We have one very specific, very effective angle for combating media. But the ICC pools resources.
Yeah, we found out what that method was. They lobby politicians to make it illegal to boycott Israel, to anti-BDS laws. They control Congress, and that's why they pass the laws. Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz being some of the worst.
From all of the campus organizations, so that like they're tapped in on all angles.
Tapped in on all angles.
The Israel on Campus Coalition is a coordinating group at the front line of the battle against BDS.
We built up this massive national political campaign to crush them and to fight back and to fight fire with fire.
I've done a couple of videos. I'll put in the link in the description below too. More on this guy and more about like the technological aspect of all the spying that they're doing on social media and the internet. Very, very disturbing stuff that none of the fake patriot Zionist media will ever talk about. A foreign state spying all over our country and buying our politicians openly. They try to tell you, oh, it's a patriotic thing to not say anything about that and go along with it all.
What we saw was a growing global movement to destroy Israel that was manifesting on American college campuses. It makes sense that they would try to poison the next generation.
Poison, yeah.
The one thing every member of Congress and president and ambassador and newspaper editor has in common is, by and large, they spent a little bit of time on a college campus, and probably those were formative years.
So they want control of the children, the formative
The Israel
years.
on Campus Coalition is at the center of the lobby's response to BDS.
There are about 100, maybe 120 now professionals that are working for a dozen national ICC partner organizations like APAC and Hazara Fellowships and Stand With Us and Hillel and Chabad.
Chabad on campus, Stand With Us, APEC, all these groups. Such a machine behind this anti-BDS thing. And they're already past it. There's the SB1 bill that they're still trying to push through. And you know for a fact Trump will sign that in a millisecond and Israel will never be able to be criticized again.
Benjamin H. Friedman was a successful Jewish businessman who was at one time the principal owner of the Woodbury Soap Company. He spent the great preponderance of his considerable fortune, at least $2.5 million, exposing the tyranny which he believed had enveloped the United States.
That is something that the people in the United States have never been told. They never knew why we went into World War I. The Balfour Declaration was merely Great Britain's promise to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into the war. When the war was ended and the Germans went to Paris, to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, when they were cutting up Germany and parceling out Europe to all these nations that claimed a right to a certain part of European territory, the Jews said, how about Palestine for us? And they produced, for the first time, to the knowledge of Germans, this Balfour Declaration. So the Germans, for the first time, realized, oh, that was the game. That's why the United States came into the war. And the Germans, for the first time, realized that they were defeated. They suffered this terrific reparations that was thrust onto them because the Zionists wanted Palestine. And they were determined to get it at any cost. When the Germans realized this, they naturally resented it. Up to that time, the Jews had never been better off in any country in the world than they had been in Germany. The Jews were doing very well in Germany. No question about that. Now, the Germans felt, well, that was quite a sellout. We've been so nice to them, and from 1905 on, when the first communist revolution in Russia failed, and the Jews had to scramble out of Russia, they all went to Germany, and Germany gave them refuge, and they were treated very nicely. And here, they sold Germany down the river for no reason at all, other than they wanted Palestine as a so-called Jewish colony.
It is the same in many other countries. Their control in Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand is far greater than it was 10 years ago. The only difference is that in those countries, it is still possible to find an occasional parliamentarian who will stand up and criticize Israel extensively. I don't believe any member of Congress, either party, criticized the White House for its blanket and unrestricted support of Israel on the day the embassy moved for the casualties it inflicted on the Palestinians. If that doesn't constitute winning, I don't know what does. They may have lost a soccer team, and they may have lost a little bit on the cultural side, and they're certainly embarrassed by BDS, but that doesn't weigh very heavily at all on the mechanics of power. And they have power. They have power in their own region, and they have influence here. The only thing that they haven't done yet is been able to get us to attack Iran or get support elsewhere to attack Iran, but they're trying. They're trying very hard.
Ashkenaz was the medieval Hebrew name for Germany. Their language is mostly Middle High German, but is distinctive because it is written in Hebrew characters and has some Hebrew and Slavic words mixed in. The Russian Empire at one time hosted the largest population of Jews in the world. Within this territory, the primarily Ashkenazi Jewish communities gave rise to the Bolsheviks, who had engineered the Russian Revolution of 1917 and had managed to kill, in the process, some 66 million Russian Christians. Although anti-Semitism has a long history, arguments can be made, and are being made, that a large degree of it in relative modern times was in direct reaction to the horrors brought about by the Jewish communist philosophy.